Okay, now that we know how to assign programmable inputs to functions, and we also know how to create macros using the macro editor or the macro recorder, let's move on to the power of events, and let's see how we can really utilize that to have even more power based on changes coming in on the rear panel control. So what I've done now is, if we go to the macro editor, I created a simple macro. Very simple. Let's recall from device memory macro number 24. I called it sync, and what it does is it changes the output gain of 3 to 20, output gain of 4 to 10, and then it sets the mute for output 7 and output 8, and then finally it sends a string out the serial port for rear panel input gain change. Now this is important because once all of these things are executed within the macro, it's also going to send the string RP and gain change out the serial port. So that's the macro that we're going to use. Now what we need to do is we need to go to rear panel control, and what I've done here is I've assigned programmable input number 1 to increment the input rear panel gain 1 dB on channel 1. So now I have a button, an external button assigned to this, so when I push the button, it's going to increment the input rear panel gain of channel 1. So finally, let's go to the Events tab. And in here, what I've done is I have enabled the rear panel input gain change, and I've set it to run macro number 24, and you notice that it's titled sync, which is the name of our macro. So if anything changes the rear panel input gain from the rear panel control, I have a button wired to the rear panel control. I'm using the PB8. So if something changes there, that event is going to cause macro number 24 to run. Now here, you'll notice I have my flash terminal up, and I have the IP address of the ITAC device that is a serial to IP box, and I just connected to the SPN 1624 via IP. So I want to listen for any RS-232 commands that are going to be coming through. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and I'm going to monitor the outputs. And I'm going to press button number 1 at this point. And when I press the button, we notice a few things. This is changed to 20. This is changed to 10. And both mutes are now enabled. And notice here, rear panel input gain change string has been sent out the serial port to notify maybe a third-party control system, Crestron or AMX, or a flash control panel, and it gives us a lot of power to stay in sync. So if someone is pressing external buttons, we can now send an event. Instead of having to poll, we can send an event so that other devices can listen and make updates on their touch panels or control panels as necessary. So it is extremely powerful for keeping hardwired connections and software connections all in sync. Okay, let's go to the next section.